Welcome to the introductory course on how to create a tasting note in MyTastingBook. When you open the Tasting Notes app, you see the Personal Account Management page. If you have one notebook, you just tap the notebook name to open it. If you have more than one notebook, you tap the Choose a Notebook button. If you tapped the Choose a Notebook button, you'll see a drop-down list of notebook names. Tap the name of the notebook where you want to add a tasting note. We picked the notebook called Wine Tasting Club Notes. There are no tasting notes yet, so we just see the Add a Note button and the invitation to please add some tasting notes. Tap the Add a Note button to start adding a new tasting note. The first page appears. The items to be filled in are required for all tasting notes: the note name, the wine type, and the tasting date. The tasting note name identifies each tasting uniquely. Every tasting note has its own name, so that it's easy for you to remember what the tasting note is for. For example, you might taste different vintages of the same wine, or you might want to remember the tasting as an occasion, like a birthday. The wine name is the name on the label. The shaded rectangle at the top of the page has icons that represent the actions you can take at any point. Until the note name, and wine type have been entered, the only option is to close the tasting note without saving it, and return to the Tasting Notes list page. You choose the wine type here to set up the wine's characteristics for the tasting note details. All remaining items for the tasting note, including the picture, are optional. You only fill in what you want. After the basic items have been filled in, you can add the vintage, tasting date, and wine style. You can take a picture of the bottle or label. Tap the Take a Picture button to snap a photo of the label right from your phone. The action items at the top of the page now include icons for copying the tasting note, deleting the tasting note, and saving the tasting note. Whenever you add or change information, the icon for saving the tasting note is displayed. When you tap the Save icon, the tasting note is saved. The icon changes to the Close icon so that you can return to the tasting notes list. If you take a picture, it will appear on the page. You can change the picture by taking the picture again, by tapping the Change the Picture button. Tap the Save icon, the diskette, and the Close button appears. Tap the right pointing arrow at the top of the page to go to the next page. The Comments and Label page is where you enter the information that is typically found on the label, like the producer name, origin, and alcohol percentage. You can enter your personal comments about the wine along with the label information. If your phone supports it, you can speak to enter any of the text fields. This might be an easy way to add your comments. You can choose the country of origin for the wine from a drop-down list. If the country has regions, you can choose a region. If the country has appellations or sub-appellations, you can add it from the appellation list. And here's the completed label page, including alcohol percentage and price. Tap the right arrow at the top of the page to move on to page 3. You could save and close the tasting note at this point if you're taking a very basic note. All of the items on the Appearance and Grapes page are selected from lists. This is how MyTastingBook helps you learn. You don't need to guess the terminology at each step. The items in each list match the wine type you selected earlier. For example, the color hue is ruby, which is a red wine color. Pick from the drop-down lists to choose the clarity, color hue, and color intensity. Here are the options for clarity. Just tap the down arrow to show the list, then tap the value you want. In the lower section of the page, you can add the grapes that we use to make the wine and the alcohol percentage by volume, or ABV, if they're listed on the label. You'll find that the grapes are often not listed on the label. The grapes in the list are specific to the type of wine you're tasting: red, white, or rosé. You can add up to 5 grapes, and optionally their percentages by volume. Here we've added 3 grapes, and their percentages by volume. Tap Save, and then tap the right arrow to move to the next page. On the Aromas and Flavors page, you choose the aroma intensity, the flavor intensity, and the aromas and flavors for the wine you're tasting. On this page, both the aroma intensity and flavor intensity have already been set to medium. There are 2 ways to choose the aromas and flavors for the wine, either List or Advanced. The List option is selected when you first open the page. With the List option selected, all flavors and aromas are displayed when you tap the down arrow symbol in the left box. Scroll down the list to find a flavor or aroma, then tap the one you want. The strawberry flavor has been selected. Next, you choose the presence of the flavor or aroma from the Select Presence list box to the right. Scroll down the list to find the presence value you feel applies, from light to pronounced. Then tap the one you want. The strawberry flavor and a pronounced presence have been selected. Once a flavor and presence have been chosen, they appear in a list. If you want to remove an entry from the list, you just tap the trash can icon to the right of the item you want removed. If you tap the advanced option, you can use the standard approved process for choosing aromas and flavors. Choose your flavors and aromas by tapping a level, either primary, secondary, or tertiary. Next, choose a flavor cluster from the cluster drop-down list. The flavor clusters correspond to the level. Next, choose an aroma or flavor. The aromas and flavors are specific to the cluster you selected. Next, choose the presence. On this page, the level is primary. The cluster is pungent spice. The aroma flavor is black pepper. Tap the question mark button to see a high-level explanation of the advanced tasting process. Tap the X button to return to the aromas and flavors page. 2 aromas and flavors have been selected. If you want to change one of the selections, delete it by tapping the trash can beside the list entry. When you have finished choosing aromas and flavors, you can tap the Save button. To go to the next page, tap the right arrow at the top of the page. The Taste and Pairings page is similar to the Appearances and Grapes page. You select most of the values from lists. On this page, the development, body, sweetness, and acidity qualities have been selected. The tannin, balance, and finish qualities have not been selected yet. The alcohol level is calculated from the alcohol by volume, ABV, that you entered on page 2. You can add the food pairings for you and your tasting companions if you had food with the wine. You can also enter suggestions for what foods would be good pairing selections for this wine, for future tastings. On the next page, you can rate the wine by quality, price range, value, meaning was the quality right for the price, and a numerical rating. The quality rating will show up as a number of stars beside the wine name in the tasting notes list for the notebook. If you added categories to the notebook that this tasting note belongs to, you can choose one or more categories on this page. In this case, no categories have been added to the notebook yet. There are instructions for how to use categories. The Tasting Companions page lets you record who was at the tasting event. You can add the names of people who were there. For those who are MyTastingBook members, you can send a copy of the tasting note to their account by tapping the button with the send icon. On this page, 2 companions have been added. Charles is a MyTastingBook subscriber, so his nickname appears in brackets after his name. When your companions list includes MyTastingBook subscribers, you can send a copy of the tasting note to them. When a companion has been selected, their name is bolded and underlined. If you have added tasting groups in your account, you can select a group of companions, and their names will be displayed for you to pick from. But those are topics to be covered in another lesson. The other companion is Miguel. They are not a MyTastingBook subscriber, and they are not included in the companions for this tasting. There is no checkmark beside their name, and their name is not bolded or underlined. On the sharing page, there are 4 ways to share the tasting note. You can send the tasting note by email to yourself, or to someone else whose email address you know. You can send the tasting note to all the members of a friends group that you set up previously. You can post a link to the note on social media. You can share the tasting note to a notebook that belongs to an organization where you are a member. When you tap the Email Tasting Note Details button, a pop-up appears. The email address is your own email address, so that you can email the tasting note details to yourself. You can change the mail address to send it to someone else. You can select which tasting notes details you want to include in the email. Page 1 of the tasting note is selected automatically. All the other pages are not selected and will not be included in the email unless you select them. To send all the details on all pages of the tasting note, tap the Select All checkbox. All the checkboxes beside the page names will be checked. To send all the details for a specific page, tap the checkbox beside the page name. To open the details for a page, tap the Open button beside the page title. Then tap the checkboxes beside the details you want to include in the email. When you have selected the details you want to send, tap the Send Email button. When you have finished sending the email, tap the X at the top right of the dialog to return to the sharing page. When you tap the Post to Social Media button, a pop-up appears. You can post to your account on LinkedIn, X, or Facebook by tapping the icon. Tap the Cancel button to close the pop-up. When you tap the Share to a Membership Notebook button, a pop-up appears. Note that this button will only be visible if you are a member of an organization. and the organization has a notebook for sharing member tasting notes. You can be a member of more than one organization. In this example, the person who owns the tasting note is a member of the fictional Oenology Society. The Oenology Society has a notebook called Member Notebook 1, where members can post their tasting notes. When you open the drop-down list for Choose a Membership Notebook, you will see a list of notebooks where you can send a copy. After you choose a notebook, the tasting note name for the copy changes to your note name followed by your nickname in brackets. Tap the Save the New Copy button to send the tasting note to the membership notebook. Tap the Cancel button to close the pop-up. The sharing page is the last page. You can review and revise the pages by tapping the right and left arrows at the top of the pages. Save the tasting note, then tap the Close button to return to the list of tasting notes. And here we are at the tasting note list, showing the name for the tasting note we just completed. You can close this page to return to the Personal Account Management page, or you can continue by adding another tasting note, or sign out if you're finished adding tasting notes. To build your library and improve your tasting skills, take a new tasting note every time you try a new wine. And be sure to compare notes with other members of the wine tasting community to share your experiences and benefit from their points of view.